No, I'm Instagram. This, look at her right there, right there. Look, I saw that was me, you know. Yeah, right. Yeah.
She had no idea who was sending the messages. That is the most important thing to understand before anything else in this case is said. When Ashley Bocanegra received texts from Daniel Gonzalez's phone on the afternoon of August 11th, 2022, she believed she was hearing from him. She believed the person on the other end of those messages was the man she had been seeing secretly. She had no reason to think otherwise. It was his phone number. It was the number she knew. She trusted it the way people trust the contact they have saved in their phone for someone they are close to. She texted back. She made arrangements. She drove to the apartment complex on Buford Drive in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Antonetta Stevens had Daniel's phone. She had been sending those messages. She had been posing as him, using his device, his words, his contact with Ashley, to bring Ashley to a location where Ashley had no idea what was waiting for her. And what was waiting for her was Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez. One of them had a phone of her own out, not to call for help, not to document anything for any legitimate purpose, to record. They were going to film what happened next. They asked her, "Are you ready to die?" And then they attacked her. Welcome to the Crime Files TV. This channel covers the stories from Black American communities that deserve to be told completely, with the victims at the center, and the full weight of every detail treated with the respect it demands. Subscribe now if you are not here already. This case has a video that was used in court, a body camera that caught a reaction that investigators described as showing no remorse, a lie told to police that is one of the most audacious in any interrogation record on this channel, and a woman who drove herself to the hospital with fractured ribs and a damaged liver because her phone had been taken and she had no other way to get help. This is the full story of Ashley Bocanegra. Now let's start from where it started. Ashley Bocanegra was 30 years old. She was originally from the Bronx, New York, and she had made a decision that a lot of parents make when they look at the environment around them and decide their child deserves something different. She relocated to Buford, Georgia, in Gwinnett County, northeast of Atlanta, to build a better life for her 7-year-old son. She brought him south. She found a place to live. She was establishing herself in a new city, building a new chapter in a state she had not grown up in, with the specific combination of courage and practicality that characterizes the people who make those moves not for themselves but for their children. Her family and friends described her as loyal and supportive and tremendously loved. Her cousin Brianna Jameson said she was beautiful inside and out. That phrase, beautiful inside and out, is the specific and complete portrait that the people closest to Ashley offered to a world that was being asked to understand what had been taken. She was not simply physically beautiful. She was the kind of person whose presence made the people around her feel something, the kind of person whose absence leaves a specific and permanent shape in the space where she used to be. She had a son, 7 years old when she died. He is the reason she moved to Georgia. He is the person for whom she was building the life that was taken from her on August 11th, 2022. She was also, by the time that summer arrived, in a relationship with Daniel Gonzalez. Daniel was a man whose life, in the months leading up to that August afternoon, had become a study in compartmentalization. He had a fiancée. Her name was Antonetta Stevens. They had a 3-year-old son together. They shared an apartment on Buford Drive with Janine Gonzalez, Daniel's teenage sister, and he was simultaneously, secretly, seeing Ashley Bocanegra. He had managed to keep those two realities separate in the specific way that people who are maintaining parallel lives manage it, through careful management of information and time and communication, until the summer of 2022 when the management broke down. Antonetta Stevens found out. The specific moment and manner of her discovery is not fully detailed in the publicly available record, but what the investigation established is that by August 11th, 2022, Stevens knew. She knew about Ashley. She knew about the affair. And she had decided, with Janine Gonzalez, what she was going to do about it. The decision they made was not to confront Daniel, not to end the relationship, not to seek any of the resolutions that someone navigating the discovery of a partner's infidelity might seek. They decided to lure Ashley to their apartment and attack her, and they decided to record it. Stevens took Daniel's phone. She used it to send messages to Ashley, posing as Daniel, creating the impression that Daniel wanted to meet her at the apartment complex on Buford Drive. Ashley had no reason to question what she was reading. The messages came from the right number. They came from the contact she trusted. She responded. She made the arrangements. She drove to Buford Drive on the afternoon of August 11th and pulled into the parking lot of the apartment complex. They were already outside waiting. Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez were there when Ashley arrived. The attack began immediately. There was no conversation that preceded it. No confrontation that gave Ashley the opportunity to understand what was happening or to respond. She was attacked the moment she was within reach. What followed was documented in two ways: by a neighbor who heard the commotion and notified the apartment complex leasing office, which led to police being called, and by Janine Gonzalez, who recorded the attack on her phone while it was happening. That recording, the video that one of the perpetrators made of the crime they were committing while they were committing it, is the piece of evidence that defines this case in ways that no other detail quite matches. The recording showed everything. It showed Ashley being punched, being kicked, being dragged by her hair. It captured what the attacker said to her during the assault. "Are you ready to die?" Those 4 words, addressed to a 30-year-old mother who had driven to a parking lot in Gwinnett County believing she was meeting someone she trusted, captured on video by the person who was simultaneously helping beat her, are the specific evidence that demolishes any claim that what happened was spontaneous or unplanned or anything other than exactly what it appeared to be: a trap, a premeditated ambush, a planned attack on a woman who did not know it was coming and could not call for help because her phone was taken from her during the assault. During the attack, Ashley's cell phone was stolen. That theft is not simply an additional charge on a list of crimes. It is a specific and deliberate act that transformed the attack from a brutal beating into something with an additional dimension of cruelty. By taking her phone, Stevens and Gonzalez ensured that Ashley could not call 911, could not call her family, could not reach anyone who might have been able to intervene or direct help to her in the critical minutes immediately following the assault. They left her in a parking lot with fractured ribs, internal damage to her liver, and internal bleeding in her lungs, without any way to summon help through the device most people rely on for exactly that purpose. Ashley Bocanegra got herself to her car. She drove to the hospital with fractured ribs, with a damaged liver, with blood pooling internally in ways that her body could not sustain. She made it to a medical facility on her own power, using what remained of her strength and her will after everything that had been done to her in that parking lot. Her sister Jessica Roche told reporters what happened when Ashley arrived. She said they fractured her ribs and her liver. She said Ashley could not breathe out of her mouth. She said medical staff had to put a tube in. Ashley was airlifted to a second facility for specialized treatment. But the injuries were too severe, the internal damage too complete. Ashley Bocanegra died from internal bleeding in her lungs a few hours after arriving at the hospital. She was 30 years old. She had driven herself to her own emergency. She had done everything physically possible to survive what had been done to her. It was not enough. And her 7-year-old son, the child she had moved from the Bronx to Georgia to give a better life, lost his mother in a hospital in Gwinnett County. On the same afternoon, she had been lured to a parking lot by a text sent from a phone that was not the person she thought was sending it. When police responded to the leasing office call and arrived at the apartment complex, they found Stevens and Gonzalez at the apartment on Buford Drive. What happened in those initial moments of police contact is one of the most revealing dimensions of this entire case, because both women attempted to construct an alternative account of what had occurred. Their initial story was that Ashley had shown up looking for Daniel and that the fight had started because Ashley was the aggressor. They were the ones who had been confronted. Ashley had come to their home uninvited. They had simply responded to the situation she created. That account fell apart immediately when investigators established through phone records and other evidence that it was Stevens who had used Daniel's phone to contact Ashley and bring her to the complex. The lure was documented. The premise of their story was false. Antonetta Stevens then went further. When officers were present and questioning her about what had happened, Stevens offered an account so extraordinary that investigators and reporters who have covered the case have described it as one of the most audacious, things said by a suspect in any interrogation they had encountered. Stevens told police that Ashley had been forcing Daniel to have sex with her. She said Ashley was threatening that if Daniel did not continue to engage in sexual relations with her, she would have him fired. She described Ashley as Daniel's manager. She said Ashley was the aggressor in every dimension of the situation. She constructed, in real time while police were standing in front of her, a complete alternative narrative in which Ashley Bocanegra was the predator and Antonetta Stevens was the victim defending her family. The video that Janine Gonzalez had recorded told a different story. The physical evidence at the scene told a different story. The phone records told a different story. The body of Ashley Bocanegra, with fractured ribs and a damaged liver and blood in her lungs, told a different story. Every piece of evidence available to investigators contradicted every element of the account that Stevens was offering from outside the door of her apartment while police were trying to understand how a woman had ended up in a hospital airlifted to surgery. There is also Daniel Gonzalez. He was in the apartment when police arrived. He had injuries on his shoulders and back that investigators observed and documented. When they asked him where those injuries came from, he would not answer. He declined to explain them. He was the man at the center of the entire situation, the man whose relationship with both Ashley and Antonetta had created the conditions for what happened in that parking lot, and when police were standing in front of him with the evidence of physical injuries on his body, he chose silence. He was never charged in connection with Ashley Bocanegra's death. His silence and the injuries that remained unexplained are one of the details that the family and the community that followed this case have pointed to as an unresolved dimension of the full picture. Now let's talk about the body camera footage. Because the video that Janine Gonzalez made during the attack is not the only recording that played a significant role in this case. When investigators questioned Antonetta Stevens in the aftermath of Ashley's death, body camera footage captured her reaction to being informed that Ashley Bocanegra had died. That footage was later used by prosecutors in their arguments about sentencing. They presented it as evidence of a lack of remorse. Whatever Stevens showed in her expression, or her words or her demeanor when she was told that the woman she had attacked was dead, the prosecution's assessment of that reaction was that it did not reflect the emotional response of someone who was horrified by the consequence of what she had done. The combination of those two videos, the recording made during the attack and the body camera footage captured during the interrogation, gave prosecutors a visual and behavioral record of both the crime and the perpetrator's subsequent emotional state that is unusual in its completeness. Most crimes of this nature, crimes that happen quickly in parking lots without advance warning, do not produce a perpetrator-recorded account of the violence itself. This one did, because one of the perpetrators decided to film it. That decision, made by Janine Gonzalez in the heat of the moment, was the decision that made the evidentiary case significantly stronger than it would otherwise have been. The charges that Gwinnett County Police filed initially reflected the full gravity of what had occurred. Felony murder, aggravated battery, robbery. Stevens and Gonzalez were both taken into custody. Both were held in the Gwinnett County Jail. Janine Gonzalez appeared in court in the days following the arrest, her emotions evident to the observers in the courtroom. Stevens maintained the specific composure that the body camera footage would later be used to characterize. In 2023, approximately a year after the attack, both Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez entered guilty pleas to voluntary manslaughter and robbery by force. The original felony murder charge was resolved through those pleas, a legal outcome that some members of Ashley's community and some true crime observers described as insufficient for what had been planned and carried out. The argument for that position is grounded in the specific elements of what happened. The lure was premeditated. The attack was coordinated between two people. A recording was made. Ashley's phone was stolen. These are not the features of an impulsive confrontation that escalated beyond what anyone intended. They are the features of a planned ambush. The resolution to voluntary manslaughter rather than murder reflects the specific legal framework the prosecutor and defense negotiated, taking into account factors including the ages of the defendants at the time of the crime and the absence of prior criminal history. Both Stevens and Gonzalez were sentenced to 20 years in prison with no parole until the full sentence is served. Their release dates are set for August 2042. Both have been transferred to Lee Arrendale State Prison, a women's facility in Alto, Georgia. Stevens will be 49 years old when she is eligible for release. Gonzalez will be 38. The question of what Daniel Gonzalez's role was and what accountability he has faced deserves to be named in this script because it is a question that the case record does not fully resolve and that Ashley's family and the community that rallied around her story have consistently raised. He was the man who was maintaining two relationships simultaneously. He was in the apartment the day of the murder. He had unexplained injuries. He declined to cooperate with investigators about those injuries. He was never charged. And his 3-year-old son with Antonetta Stevens and Ashley's 7-year-old son are both growing up in a world shaped by what Daniel Gonzalez's choices set in motion. That is not an allegation of criminal conduct. It is a statement about moral reality that the legal proceedings do not fully address. Ashley Bocanegra's cousin, Brianna Jameson, said after the arrests that the two women were lucky the cops got them. She said they were obviously jealous. She said Ashley was beautiful inside and out, and she could see why jealousy was a factor. And then she said something that names the ugliness of jealousy with the specific directness of someone who has been sitting inside the grief it produced. She said jealousy is the ugly trait to have. Jealousy. The specific and documented motive that Stevens admitted to investigators was the foundation of the argument she was having with Daniel, the argument that drove the planning, the lure, the coordinated attack in the parking lot. Investigators said Stevens admitted that the cheating was the cause of the argument. The cheating was the cause. Not Ashley specifically. Not some grievance against Ashley that predated the affair. The discovery that Daniel was cheating, the rage and the hurt and the entitlement that discovery produced in someone who had been with him long enough to have a child with him and been engaged to him, became the fuel for a plan that ended Ashley Bocanegra's life. Let's be direct about where the anger in this case was directed and why it matters. Ashley Bocanegra was not the person who made a commitment to Antonetta Stevens. She was not the person who made a commitment to Janine Gonzalez's brother. She was not the fiancée. She was not the person who had chosen to maintain a double life while someone else's trust was being used as cover. Daniel Gonzalez was that person. He made those commitments. He managed that double life. He had the information that both women lacked. He knew what he was doing, and he did it anyway. And he was in that apartment on the day that the consequences of his choices landed in the parking lot outside. The anger that Stevens and Gonzalez directed at Ashley Bocanegra was anger that, by any measure of its actual origin, should have been directed at Daniel. But Daniel was the person they lived with. Daniel was the person Stevens was engaged to. Daniel was Janine's brother, and Ashley was the person on the outside of all of that. The person who had no power in their household. The person who could be lured to a location using the same phone that had been used to conduct the affair with her. She was the accessible target for the rage that Daniel had generated. That dynamic, the redirection of rage from the partner who betrayed toward the third party, who was also betrayed in a different way, is documented in research on intimate partner jealousy and aggression. It is more common than the opposite, and in its most extreme expressions, it produces exactly what happened on Buford Drive on August 11th. A woman who did not make the commitments that were broken, who did not have the power in the situation that the people planning the attack had, who arrived at a parking lot believing she was walking toward something familiar and found herself in the middle of something she had never anticipated. Ashley Bocanegra drove herself to the hospital because they took her phone, because with fractured ribs and a damaged liver and blood filling her lungs, she had no other way. She got in her car and she drove. That act, the will it required and the courage it represented, is the last recorded action of a 30-year-old mother from the Bronx who moved to Georgia so her son could have a better life, and who fought with everything she had right up until the moment that what had been done to her in that parking lot was too much for any amount of will to overcome. She deserved better than a fake text from a familiar number. She deserved better than a parking lot in Gwinnett County where two people were waiting with a camera. She deserved to see her son grow up. She deserved the better life she had driven 800 miles to build. Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez are at Lee Arrendale State Prison. They will be there until 2042. The video they made of the attack was used against them in court, one of the more fitting reversals available in the public record of this case. They filmed it because they wanted to. The court watched it because it told the truth. 3 boys are growing up without their mothers. Ashley's 7-year-old, Antonetta and Daniel's 3-year-old. And the specific shape of what Daniel Gonzalez's choices produced, left in the lives of children who had no part in any of it, is the full and permanent cost of what happened on August 11, 2022. If you are in a situation where a partner's infidelity has left you carrying anger, confusion, or a sense of betrayal that feels impossible to manage alone, please reach out for support. The National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 is available for anyone navigating the complicated and painful dynamics of relationship. Betrayal free, confidential, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by call, text, and chat at thehotline.org. Subscribe to the Crime Files TV. Share this video for Ashley, for her son, for the cousin who said she was beautiful inside and out and she could see why they were jealous. She used his phone to lure her there. Then she filmed what happened next. The court used that film to sentence them to 20 years.